Less than a week since coming to power, sources say the new Premier of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, has now expedited the process of getting his brother, Nawaz Sharif, back to Pakistan. The deposed Prime Minister and Supremo of the PML-N party is currently residing in London. Sources say the new Prime Minister has ordered that Nawaz Sharif should get his diplomatic passport in the next 5 days. And once the passport is printed in Islamabad, it will be handed over to the Foreign Ministry, which will ship it to London. As a former Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif by law is entitled to a diplomatic passport which had expired in February last year but had not been renewed by the Imran Khan government. Meanwhile, the new Shehbaz Sharif government has gotten to work. One of the main agendas, changes at the country's investigation agencies. In the latest, Babar Bakht Qureshi, the head of cybercrime of the Federal Investigation Agency, has been removed. Now, this comes days after two other officers, FIA Lahore head Mohammad Rizwan and former anti-corruption Punjab director Gohar Nafiz, were placed on the no-fly list. All these individuals have one thing in common. They were all investigating members of the newly formed government. For example, while serving as the FIA counter-terrorism wing head, Babar Bakht Qureshi had prepared corruption references against the PPP leadership. As the head of the cybercrime wing, he had grilled PML-N leaders, including Parvez Rashid, a close aide of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Now, one thing is certain, as this new government is settling in, there are more sackings and transfers on the cards. Let's get in further details now from our Pakistan Bureau Chief, Anas Malik, who's with us on the broadcast live from Islamabad. Anas, if you can take us through the process that will be followed as far as the issuing of this diplomatic passport for Nawaz Sharif is concerned. Is this an unprecedented measure when it comes to expediting the issuing of a diplomatic passport for a leader?
Indeed, it is an unprecedented measure for expediting the procedures, because the procedures say that the Interior Ministry would have to move through the Interior Secretary and onwards to the Prime Minister, and not the other way around. This time it's the Prime Minister who has instructed the Interior Secretary, and the Ministry of Interior has gone into a huddle already, and they've begun the processing of this diplomatic passport. What we are given to understand is that the printing will be completed by tomorrow, and tomorrow evening or Saturday morning is when the diplomatic baggage this passport will be sent to London. This can take up to 3 days once the printing process is done. The printing process is managed by the Ministry of Interior, and once it's done printing, then it will be handed over to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which will then send it to its High Commission in London, which will eventually be handing over this passport, this diplomatic passport, to former Premier Nawaz Sharif, which can possibly pave way for him to come back to Pakistan. Remember, his status currently in England is that his visa is on an appeal, and that because his passport was cancelled and revoked and refused to be renewed by the then administration or by the then government, therefore he was in a limbo, but not anymore. Molly?
Right, Anas, also let's talk about one of the key agendas of the new Shehbaz Sharif government when it comes to reforms at the country's investigation agencies. Now, these members who have been undergoing changes as far as their positions are concerned, they were all investigating members of this newly formed government.
Well, they were part of the investigation agency which was overlooking the cases against the incumbent government, and we've seen that there has been a precedent per se. Whenever a government comes into power, its associated parleys or its associated cases against them, they simply come to either a stop the investigation against that, or the fact that cases against them they're usually deemed slow. low. So again, it's not a departure from what is the usual, not a norm certainly, but it is something that is very usual. We've seen that happening in the past, and now a new FIA director who was investigating the sugar inquiry and money laundering cases, he's gone on leaves. So that would again give that hit to that accountability narrative, but it has a flip side to it as well, that this was targeted or selective accountability. So it has both sides of the coin, and depends on how would one want to see it. Molly?
Unless we're leaving it there, thanks very much for those inputs. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.